spend some time exploring the military from our Red Cross SAF family support perspective. Whether building relationships with local military leaders, providing case management services, conducting briefings, supporting military, family, and veteran events, it is important to know our customer. If you aren't very familiar with the military, this hour is the beginning of learning about our military client. There is lots of information about the military, and we'll only be able to get you started. At the end of this course, I hope you will continue to learn about our military personnel, and the impact of their service on their families. We will be providing you with a number of resources at the end. If you do have a military background, either as a service member or as a military family member, you will probably find this to be very basic, as it is. Sit back, enjoy. You just might learn something new or be reminded of something, perhaps about another branch of service, or you might be reminded of something you've forgotten. Feel free to use this slide presentation for local training, and we have provided training objectives to assist you. At the end of this hour, you'll be able to describe the difference between the branches of service, identify the differences between the active component, the National Guard and Reserve, name the 3 phases of the deployment cycle, and identify sources of support for the military. Let's look at the 5 branches of service. First we're going to look at is the Army, or referred to as soldiers. They make up about 38% of the entire military. Their mission, while they provide full combat operations, they increasingly provide non-combat humanitarian assistance. Their main land-based force, they are the largest of the U.S. service branches. It does have a National Guard component. Their installations are referred to as posts and named like Fort Huachuca. It's organized in squads, platoons, companies, battalions, brigades, divisions, corps, and armies. The Marine Corps, or your Marines, make up about 14% of the military. Their mission is a rapid deployment in combat operations. They are the smallest branch of service, except for the Coast Guard. Often the first force into an operation, conducts amphibious water landing operations, and also provides air support. We also provide security to U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. Their installations are referred to as bases and named like Camp Lejeune. It's organized in teams, squads, platoons, companies, battalions, regiments, and divisions, very similar to the Army. The Navy, or sailors, make up about 22% of the military. Their mission is maintains the freedom of the seas. Operates nearly 300 ships, including amphibious types, aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. Hence our people who are working with our cases. You should recognize that when a submarine is submerged, it cannot always surface in order for a sailor to respond to a family emergency. Installations are referred to as bases or stations and named like Oceana Naval Air Station, Norfolk Naval Base, or Saratoga Springs Naval Support Activity. The Navy has a wide variety of units and organizations to include ships, naval bases, naval air bases, and land-based support units. The Air Force, or airmen, make up about 23% of the military. Their mission is protection of space and cyberspace. Conducts aerial warfare and support, and it also has a National Guard component. It's organized in flights, squadrons, groups, wings, numbered air forces, and major commands. Their installations are referred to as bases and named like Tinker Air Force Base. And the Coast Guard, or Coast Guardsmen, make up about 3%. Their mission is concerned with law and drug enforcement, boating safety, sea rescue, and illegal immigration control. They're part of Homeland Security, but can be transferred to the Department of the Navy during conflicts. Consists of ships, boats, cutters, aircraft, and shore stations. Installations are referred to as stations and named like Coast Guard Station Cape Charles. Even though we just talked about how each of the groups are distinct and different, they do work together. Keep in mind that they have much in common. Working together, collaboration among branches of service is often referred to as being purple. One concrete example of being purple is the joint base concept. Different branches of service have installations that are located in close proximity. They often are now combining into one joint base. For example, in Washington State, Fort Lewis, which is Army, and McChord Air Force Base have been combined into Joint Base Lewis-McChord. And in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, you have Navy Little Creek Amphibious Base and Army Fort Story are now Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek Fort Story. Where are the military? Or better yet, do I have military in my chapter? Military installations are across the United States and around the world. Our military members and their families come from and have families in hometowns across America. Chances are you have military in your community, whether it's a military installation, a National Guard armory, a reserve center, a VA hospital, recruiters, ROTC, or military families. They are there. A couple of interesting facts about our military clients. Military members are significantly more likely to come from high-income neighborhoods than the lower income. They're more educated than their non-military peers, and minorities are not overrepresented in the military. Just a couple facts to think about as you're working with your clients. When men and women volunteer to serve in the military, there are options on the status of their service. They can go active, which means they're going to serve full-time for at least 4 years, attend basic training, advanced training, and then are assigned to a unit. The family may join the service member at advanced training or maybe at the first unit. Most often, they're going to be far from their home or their extended family and their normal support system. They most often are going to be located on or near an installation where a support system has been developed. If the member remains on active duty, they can expect to move about every 3 or 4 years. The reserve component. After they volunteer, they attend basic training and advanced training and then serve in a unit close to home, generally 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks each summer. Many reservists have served on active duty, and then when they leave the active component, join the reserves. In this case, military is, quote, kind of a part-time job, while most remain with their full-time job or career in their hometown. They are subject to activation and deployment, where often the families are not close to traditional support and installations, but are in hometowns across America. The National Guard, often referred to as your citizen soldier, frequently is a family tradition in many communities. It's state-based and led, supports their state during emergencies on Title 32 orders, but also supports the federal military component with overseas operations on Title 10 orders. Similar to the reserves, very much like the reserves, they attend basic training and advanced training, and then serve in a unit close to home, 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks each summer. Again, military is kind of a part-time job, while most remain with their full-time job or career or school in their hometowns. They're again subject to activation and deployment, and again, families are not always close to a support of the installation and not always prepared for the deployment. Before 2001, the roles of the active duty National Guard and the reserves were more distinct. With the increased deployment tempo, today reserve and National Guard units and individuals are more likely to spend time on active duty assignments within and outside the United States. These active duty assignments, regardless of where they are located or the length of the assignment, impacts the military member and their families. After their been on their either active reserve or National Guard status. We have what they're referred to as a veteran. And for Red Cross purposes, men and women who have served honorably in defense of a country are veterans. They receive the benefits from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and the amount of Veterans Administration support that they qualify for will depend on many factors, to include disability, length of service, and area served. When a service member serves at least 20 years of active duty, they can retire from the military and may become a retiree as well as a veteran. Some individuals will be medically retired, leaving military duty before 20 years due to physical disabilities. Retirees have an identification card with this designation, and retirees authorize several benefits by the military to include access to health care, Military Aid Society financial assistance, access to legal and other support services. The military is organized into officer and enlisted ranks. The more senior an officer or enlisted rank, the more authority, responsibility, knowledge, and experience the person has, and more people they have reporting to them. Although officers and enlisted personnel typically do not fraternize socially outside the workplace, in the workplace they respect each other's experience, sphere of influence, and roles and responsibilities. Officers, the people who are called, serve, or man. Officers come primarily from college ROTC programs as well as service academies and officer candidate schools, where enlisted personnel can train to become officers. Officers are the decision makers in the military and have a say in creating strategy. They are responsible for leading units ranging from 20 to more than 20,000. Nearly all hold undergraduate degrees, with salaries ranging from about $30,000 for lieutenants to around $150,000 for generals. Together, officers comprise about 15% of the armed forces. As you can see, they are the management and the leadership of the armed forces. And if you look at this slide, you can get a general equivalency of what their rank might be in the civilian sector. Enlisted soldiers are broken up into two broad categories: junior enlisted and non-commissioned officers, or NCOs. NCOs are commonly known as the backbone of the military and comprise about 40% of the forces. Though all enlisted troops are technically subordinate to all officers, NCOs' greater experience and proximity to junior enlisted give them great influence over the internal attitudes, behaviors, and inductions of new enlistees, troops, and Marines and airmen. NCOs frequently earn 2 to 4 year degrees while serving and earn roughly $25,000 to $60,000 per year. If you ask to speak with a senior NCO, you will most likely be connected with an E7 or E8. And again, if you look at the slide, you can get a rough idea of what the military rank might be equivalent to in the civilian world. Non-commissioned officers, E4 to E5, and our staff non-commissioned officers, E6 to E9. NCOs train and supervise junior enlisted, and they enforce the officers' policies. They make many decisions without officer input. The junior enlisted, your E1 to E3, your Army privates and corporals, Navy seamen and petty officers, Marine privates, and Air Force airmen. They make up most of the military, about 45% of the armed forces. They're kind of the workhorses of the armed forces, and they comprise the majority of the combat troops. Junior enlisted earn about $15,000 to $25,000 per year, and the vast majority are high school graduates, with more and more frequently they are earning bachelor's degrees, especially in some specialty fields such as language and intelligence. And again, you can look at the slide and you can get kind of an idea of what a civilian type role would be equivalent to the military rank. we're going to look at the deployment cycle. Deployments are a fact of life in the military. Whether a service member's absence is due to a training exercise, sea duty, combat, or unaccompanied duty in a remote location, regardless of the length of time, separation and reunification pose unique opportunities as well as challenges for all family members. The deployment cycle is continuous and has three main phases: pre-deployment, deployment, and the post-deployment reintegration. We're going to review each of these phases and discuss some of the ways in which each phase might affect the service member and family. We'll also read some quotes from a very good resource, a handbook for family and friends of service members before, during, and after deployment by the Defense Centers of Excellence for Psychological Health and Traumatic Brain Injury. We hope the examples will help you to understand the types of stressors and challenges that your clients may face. As we discuss deployment, keep in mind that Red Cross has a Coping for Deployment course and the Reconnection Workshop presented by Walmart series for family members to learn skills to assist them in dealing with the challenges of deployment. Pre-deployment is considered normal life. The service members at home and training are working normally during his or her duty hours. Mobilization occurs when a unit or individual is alerted of a planned deployment. Mobilization may involve additional training and evaluations, sometimes away from the family's home, information sessions for families. For reserves and National Guard, this may mean military members reporting to a mobilization station away from home for their training and processing. Mobilization almost always involves stress, uncertainty, unknowns, waiting to say goodbye. One example is it's common for couples to have at least one major argument before a service member actually deploys. Whether consciously or unconsciously, some find it easier to say goodbye if they're less connected emotionally. We have a quote from a Marine wife.
We argued a lot. We picked fights with each other. I think part of me just wanted him to get emotional about leaving. I needed reassurance that I could press his buttons and he would know how much his leaving was hurting me.
The deployment involves the actual physical movement of individuals and units to the theater of operation, or out to sea, or to wherever their remote site might be. The length of the deployment varies, as does the time between deployments. Generally, and this is constantly changing, the deployment phase has the following duration. The Army tends to deploy from about 9 to 12 months, with 12 months between, although there are considerable concerted efforts being made right now to get that length of time to be longer. The Marines deploy for roughly 7 months, with 7 months between. The Navy, this is it varies a lot, but I'd say the average about 6 months at sea, and again, the time that they're at home, docked, varies greatly. In the Air Force, their deployments have been running about 3 to 4 months. The length of deployment and the time between deployments depends on the needs of the unit and its mission at any given time. All branches of service have desirable average times between deployments when a service member is located at his or her home installation or at home, as with the National Guard and Reserve. But one important component of military culture is that the mission comes first. There is a potential for ongoing stress during deployment, as the service member and family face the realities of the separation and what it means. We have a quote from an Army wife.
I personally found that what worked best for me was to stay busy and never watch the news. Someone in his family would always call when a casualty was reported on the news and frantically ask me if it was Frank when I had talked to him last. And as much as I wanted to blow them off, I would inevitably start thinking, well, when did I talk to him last? I spent half the deployment thinking he was dead because of those phone calls.
And here's a quote from a Marine Corps son.
Ever since my dad's been in Iraq, my mom has been pretty moody. I try to help out a lot and fill in for my dad, like washing the car, mowing the lawn, and playing soccer with my little brother and sister. think it makes my mom feel better and takes some of the pressure off of her, but I get tired of doing my chores and my homework, as well as all the extra stuff.
Thank you. And post-deployment, service members or units initially return to their home station. Service members receive briefings, evaluations, and counseling to assist in the reintegration into, quote, normal life. Family members also receive information to help with the reintegration. Potential stresses, the anticipation, the highs and the lows of reunion. And reintegration is that ongoing adjustment to fully returning to normal, quote, normal, work, family, and community life. Some of the potential stress, everyone or everything may appear to have changed during service members' deployment and return. Some changes may be perceived as positive, and other changes may present challenges to a service member or to his or her family. Here are a wife and a coworker commenting on how reintegration affected them. This may help to illustrate some potential effects of deployment on the service member and his or her family, friends, and colleagues. This is from an Air Force wife.
I learned that marriages are resilient. They do get damaged and broken, but if you work, you can put them back together. We were definitely broken for several months after he came home. He left one type of family and came back to a different one.
Thank you. And a civilian coworker.
I'd worked with Tom for at least 6 years when he got orders to Iraq, so I kind of considered him a friend, not just a coworker. I even put together some office care packages to send to him and checked in on his wife and daughter a couple of times. A bunch of us threw him a welcome back party, and you could tell that he was a little freaked out by it. Like, all the commotion and people made him super uncomfortable. I kind of felt bad because I was just trying to let him know that we missed him. Sort of kept to himself after that. Finally, I asked him if it had upset him. He told me that ever since the war, he's been kind of jumpy and weirded out when surrounded by a lot of people, but he was seeing someone at the VA about it. Man, I wish I knew that before I threw the party.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this now over to Jackie.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, as we've seen, one of the most important components of military culture is that the mission comes first. It's often a lot easier for the military member to learn that more quickly than some of the family members. Because the military lifestyle is unique in many ways, the military has built systems and benefits to support military members and their families. And in this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of support that military members receive. Some of the benefits that active duty members receive are housing. They can get housing on post or base, or a housing allowance. They get a basic allowance for subsistence, which is a food allowance. They have access to a thrift savings plan, which is like a 401k for military members. They have access to benefits from the GI Bill, both while they're on active duty and as veterans, and that helps paying for higher education. They and their families have access to medical care, both on base through the clinics and hospitals, and also through medical insurance called TRICARE. They get leave or vacation, as we know it in the civilian world. They get 30 days of leave a year. That includes emergency leave. They also get admin leave, which covers different types of situations that they may be in. So, for example, Debbie mentioned that they may move every 3 to 4 years. When they do, they might get a move that helps them go house hunting. They'll get time to actually make the move, get their family moved to their new posting, and that's not counted against their regular leave. If they become ill or injured and they need recuperation time, they may get convalescent leave, and that's also not counted against their regular leave. New dads are eligible for paternity leave within the first year after their baby is born, and once again, that's leave that's not counted against their 30 days annual vacation. The military is committed to supporting their families. And they provide that support in a variety of ways. In addition to all the benefits that we talked about, they have a number of programs and resources. One of the most well-known is Military OneSource, which is kind of a one-stop internet web-based site for information and assistance. And another is the Military Aid Societies. Every branch of the service has a Military Aid Society associated with it. These are independent nonprofit organizations that raise their own money and provide financial assistance to eligible clients and for eligible situations. Sometimes it's helpful, especially if you're in a community that doesn't have a big installation, and you're talking to military family members, to ask them if they're familiar with these resources. Lots of times, a service man or servicewoman will go into the military and they will learn all of these things, but don't always get those communications back home. So it's often helpful to ask if a family member is aware that there are resources out there for them that are free for them to access. Family support programs on installations offer counseling of all kinds. They may include debt counseling, legal counseling, personal counseling, financial assistance, and information and referral to all kinds of resources. One example is the Exceptional Family Member Program. If a military member and his or her spouse has a child who has special needs of one kind or another, maybe needs access all the time to certain types of specialty medical care, there's an Exceptional Family Member Program that these families can be referred to. Oftentimes people don't know about these things until someone reminds them that these services are there for them. Many commands and units have family and spouse groups, and these are excellent sources of information. These are harder to come by away from an installation, but many National Guard units do have these groups in the civilian community, and they're great ways for families to get together to support one another, and also for the newbies on the block to learn a little bit about what they can expect from military life and some of the practical how-tos that other people have learned through painful experience. This entire military system is supported and supplemented by community organizations like our own, the American Red Cross, USO, Armed Forces YMCA, the National Military Family Association, Wounded Warrior Project, Operation Homefront, Give an Hour, to name just a few. So what exactly can a military family expect from an installation, or even a single active duty member? Well, an installation is the equivalent of a community, a small town, sometimes actually a pretty big town, or a neighborhood. Installations have churches, hobby shops, lawyers, hospitals, beauty salons, restaurants. There's an infrastructure, fire department, police department. They have athletic fields, team sports, hobby shops of all kinds. You can go and learn how to fix your car. You can do crafts. There's often a grocery store. If you're lucky enough and you have a big PX or BX base exchange, you have a department store available to you. Postal services. There are all kinds of things available in that community, and it's a great place for families to come together. Most installations support scout troops, all kinds of organizations, athletic teams for young people, everything. For military members who are not stationed on or near an installation, that is, for a lot of reservists and National Guard and their families, the installation community support is fulfilled through their local community and through organizations like ours, where people learn about these types of programs and reach out to military families to support them. Local communities outside the gates of an installation are also great resources for military members and families who are assigned to those organizations. Even though the military is a transitional population, many people become very integrated into their communities through their church or their interest groups, athletics, and so on, and find that those towns are great support systems. So let's look at another aspect of military culture, and this aspect deals with respect. We're going to talk about 4 areas of respect that are very important in the military. One is the respect for authority. As we all know, one of the cornerstones of our American democracy is civilian control of the military. Civilian leaders set our nation's policy, our foreign policy, and how the military supports our nation's interests at home and abroad. The military is designed to advise that civilian leadership on what is militarily possible. The chain of command runs from the President of the United States to civilians in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and then to the most senior military commanders of each service, as well as the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Anyone who has ever been associated with the military knows it is governed by regulations. Many regulations. Most of these are public documents. You can find them on the internet if you have any reason or desire to know about them. And they govern every aspect of the military member's life, from the clothing they wear when they're on duty to how they're supposed to take care of their families. Every branch of service has a documents page as part of its official website. Service members are required to be aware of the rules and regulations that govern their lives, but they don't always. So sometimes it's helpful for us to know that they're out there. These rules and regulations basically support military discipline. It assumes that everyone knows the baseline, what's expected of them, and operates accordingly. Another aspect of service is respect for their particular branch of service. As Debbie pointed out, every branch has a different mission, and every branch has its own unique history and traditions. Military members become dedicated to that mission and also to the history and traditions of their branch of service. More than just a job to them, it's a way of belonging to a very unique organization. And as part of that belonging, they have a great deal of respect for each other. Military members and their families typically are very loyal to their country, to their branch of service, to their unit, and to each other. Service members depend on one another, sometimes for their very survival. Units can become very close-knit, and military leaders emphasize the importance of taking care of one another. This respect for each other and taking care of one another is prevalent on the battlefield and also on the home front. Military families are very good at helping one another. There are a couple of areas of respect that we civilians need to be aware of if we are at military events or with a group of military members. As Debbie mentioned, officers are referred to as sir or ma'am. Don't be surprised that you will be called sir or ma'am, especially if you are wearing your Red Cross emblem, because people show respect for the organization through their language. If you're not sure how to address someone, you may address anyone as sir or ma'am. If they are not a sir or ma'am, they will tell you what you can call them. And usually they will help you know whether they want to be called sergeant or by their first name or their last name or Mr. or Ms. or however they want to be called. Another very important component of respect is the military's respect for our nation's flag. If you've ever been on a military installation at certain times of the day, the flag is lowered and hoisted in the evenings and the morning at little ceremonies, usually accompanied by some kind of a trumpet call, at which point anyone who is outside comes to a stop and salutes the flag. Military members in uniform will snap to a salute. Civilians should stand with their hand over their heart, facing the flag, and most just follow the direction most people are looking in, because they pretty much know where the flag is on the post. Even if you can't see it, you'll hear the music. When the flag passes in procession, or when it's raised and lowered, everyone should face the flag and salute. And again, if you're in doubt, look around you and follow what everybody else is doing. It's a little daunting the first time you experience it, but you become accustomed to it. And finally, those of us who are on installations, and especially in our capacity as American Red Cross employees or volunteers, need to understand that military members also respect appearance. Most of them have to endure inspections, some of which are very detailed in terms of looking at their shoes, their uniforms, their hair, whether their collar's clean, and so forth. And we also need to show respect for the uniform by our choice of attire when conducting business on the installation. The American Red Cross emblem is both recognized and respected by members of the military, and it's important to remember that when we put that Red Cross on, we are the Red Cross to everyone who sees us and who we talk to. So, that's a little primer on military culture. We actually have a number of resources that we wanted to present you with today that are posted on the neighborhood. We have a resource of terms and acronyms. There probably is no organization, including our own, that doesn't have them, but it's important to know military terms and acronyms. So we have that. We also have a little guide to military time, which is on a 24-hour clock. We have a 10-minute guide to America's military, and we have something called Challenges Facing Military Members and Their Families. There are also opportunities for online training and information. These can be especially helpful if you're new to service to the armed forces, or if you're trying to bring new employees and volunteers up to speed with the new culture that they will be dealing with when they are talking to clients. And we have on the slide deck some different sites that offer free courses. The Center for Deployment Psychology Military Cultural Competence course, for example, is a very good course. It's free, it's web-based, and it's a very nice overview of military life. It's also important to note that individual installations, units, and shifts have their own websites. These are great resources for families. Many members of these installations, units, and shifts probably know about these websites, but they often may not communicate that back home. But these are great ways for families to feel connected to their military member by seeing what is posted about all of these units and so on. Many units and shifts have their histories posted there. You can tell a little bit about where they are, what they're doing, what their mission is. And also, often there's contact information on these websites. One example we can think of is if there's a large disaster, and like the tsunami and earthquake that hit Japan, the ships that were stationed there had things posted on their websites almost immediately that everyone on board ship was okay, and the ship was involved in disaster relief operations. So sometimes those are great referral resources for families because the units and the ships will get information up very quickly if some event occurred in their area. Okay, that's my report.